What's going on, guys? It's your boy beatsbyash back at it again with another live reaction to the World Championship of Magic the Gathering for draft day number 2. If you haven't checked out our first review of draft day number 1, that one is up on the channel, and I highly recommend you go check that one out. But today, this pod is going to be filled with the players with the highest standings at the beginning of day number 2, and this is the pod that we're going to be looking at. So let's go ahead and get right into the goo. So starting off, we have Simon Nielsen in this pod. He was the featured drafter of yesterday's draft, and in case you haven't seen that video, I'm not going to spoil how it went for him, but he is 5-2, so obviously some things had to go well for him, and he is the defending player of the year, so obviously he has been on a major tear, and we're going to see if he's going to be able to do it again. We also have Seth Manfield, who has also been doing extremely exceptional. I believe the other person who could potentially beat out Simon for player of the year race in this tournament, depending on if he makes to the finals and Simon doesn't make it to top 8, I think he can actually legally beat him out for player of the year. So that's kind of cool to see both of them in this pod at the same time. And then we also have JED, John Emmanuel Debraz. I know I'm not saying that right, but that's okay. This guy is 7-0, and he is last year's world champion. You know, I did not know a lot about this guy before last year, but I swear every time I tune in on a pro Magic event, this guy is always on top. And starting off 7-0 after the first day when you won the world championship last year, that is just ridiculous. And he also just so happens to be our featured drafter for this draft. So I'm excited to see what he is going to be doing because he is a world champion, so maybe he knows something about draft that we do not. So let's go ahead and hop into this draft and see what JED can do here. All right, let's see what he opens here. I'm hoping we can see a green deck because I just really like playing green in this format. I find it the most fun color and also the color that just allows you to go into as many different possible directions. And I just think that diversity and that non-repetitive gameplay experience is what makes this Magic set an all-time banger for me. Is this one of your favorite Magic sets of all time to draft? Let me know down below in the comments because it's definitely up there with me. And also, Modern Horizons 3 was a great one too.
Draft number 2. What does he find? He finds...
Okay, so he's got an Inquisitive Glimmer and a Defiant Survivor. That's pretty cool.
Oh, wow, look at that.
Oh, and he has a Silent Hall Creeper and a Twitching Doll? Dude, wow. This pack is gas, dude. Are you kidding me?
And you can kind of go either way with this. Both cards are really, really strong. Twitching Doll.
Okay, let's talk about this. So, in my opinion, I feel like red and green, for me personally, are the best colors to start in just because I feel like they allow you to go in the most possible different directions and stay open. And that is a big advantage to have in the World Championship. Although Silent Hall Creeper is probably a little bit better than our other rare Twitching Doll, just in terms of what it does and its potential ceiling. So Twitching Doll can be very good if you have a lot of recurring mechanisms, such as Say Its Name or Under the Skin, which are the 2 green cards at uncommon or lower, which allow you to buy back creature cards from the graveyard, because Twitching Doll can allow you to sacrifice it for each counter that it has on it, and you acquire counters every time it taps to add a mana of any color, and you get 2/2 tokens with reach. So if you're able to buy that back, it can actually be a win condition as well as just a mana dork. But Silent Hall Creeper requires an immediate answer, and if you get one hit with it, you're almost always going to choose the draw option first, so that if your opponent uses a removal spell, you're always going to be up a card. And I just think that is a way more huge impact on the board immediately than Twitching Doll. Even though Twitching Doll is in a color that I would strongly prefer to start in instead, but I do think after green and red, blue is the color that you would like to start in the second most if we're going to tier it out. So I would slam this Silent Hall Creeper here and be very happy because it is also important to note that is an enchantment creature, and if we know anything about duskmourn, enchantments really pack a punch with all of the payoffs and triggers that you get for those effects. And if he ends up green-blue, it's still 2 card types on 1 card for Delirium. The Twitching Doll also provides that, but with those other inherent synergies that I noted, I think Silent Hall Creeper is an easy slam here.
It all gives you a lot more flexibility in how you draft your deck because, of course, it's just a fantastic card. And if you're a base green deck, you can splash multiple colors. So I really don't think you can go wrong with either. But it looks like
he's going to go with the Silent Hall Creeper. I respect it. I hope we're going to get a more reasonable draft from JED today because yesterday I just feel like Simon kind of put himself in a weird position and he did luck out a little bit. But I'm hoping that JED will be a little bit more conservative here.
At any rate, you can.
I'd be interested to see what deck he drafted yesterday, because he is 7-0, so he obviously had a 3-0 his last draft. Okay, so this pack has a Spineseeker Centipede, a Threats around every corner, and a Shroud Stomper. Wow, this pack is loaded, and a Piggy Bank. Man, okay. Yeah, Threats is basically just a better card than Spineseeker Centipede. It looks like the rare is missing here, so not really much information you can gather from this, but Threats around every corner is easily just the best card in the pack, and it's a card that works very well with the Silent Hall Creeper, because manifesting Dread into the Hall Creeper is amazing, because you can just flip it up on your turn, and they'll be very unsuspecting about it, and then you get in with that unblockable, draw your card, and at that point, you're just so ahead. And I also just believe that green-blue is personally my favorite green deck to be in, either be green-blue, splashing a red card or a black card, any combination of those. So this pack has a Glimmer Light, and it really doesn't have much else here. Yeah, you're not going to take that Land Cycler. I mean, Glimmer Light is probably not only just the best card in that pack, the card that can go in the most amount of decks, and he's sending a really, really bad pack to the left. Like, I think that's one of the worst packs we've seen between this video and the last video. Whoever's getting past that pack is going to feel really bad because there's basically no cards in that pack left that I would hope to play. Okay, there's a Disturbing Mirth, a card that we saw from Simon yesterday that really, really helped him out if you ended up watching his games. There's also a Final Vengeance, which might be a signal that black could be somewhat open. He's eyeing that Orphans the Wheat, which is pretty interesting, because I don't think green is really good with white, but blue is, and the Glimmer Light is pretty good in a blue-white deck, so I guess that is a very fair decision. Once again, probably a little lower power level of a pack overall. In these flat power level packs, you're kind of just looking to take the highest potential upside card, and I think that was very fair of a decision there. Leaving himself open to both blue-white or blue-green. Okay, this pack has a Slimy Aquarium. It also has a Fear of Imposters.
There's a lot of ways to go wide.
And it has a Fanatic of Harrowing, and there's a Demonic Council, one of my favorite cards to play with. But yeah, this is a pretty bad back as well. I think this is just an easy Slimy Aquarium, Underwater Tunnel. A card that I actually like quite a bit in a green-blue deck. Fear of Imposters is one that I've seen quite a few people talk up, but I'm just not a big fan of that card. I feel like, on average, it's okay, but it's not something I'm hoping to play. It's like a 23rd card in your deck, right? Okay, this pack has a Baseball Bat, an Ultinac, and a Land Cycler. Interesting that he's pulling the Baseball Bat to the front. So I think this is actually a pretty interesting pick here, right? So currently we have 2 blue cards, 1 green card, a Glimmer Light, and a Orphans of the Wheat being our only white card. I think the worst one of these 4 cards is easily the Baseball Bat because it's not necessarily a reward like you might think for a green-white deck because realistically, green-white's biggest disadvantage is that those are 2 of the better colors, and a lot of the cards that could make a green-white deck work are often sought after by other players, and Baseball Bat isn't really a good enough card to make up for that deficit of you trying to fight over the same premium cards that other players are likely trying to fight over as well. I think the decision between Ultinac and the Green Land Cyclers is actually pretty close. I think neither of these cards really makes him super excited about moving into green, but I do think they both provide an advantage that a green-blue deck wants, which is having at least 2 to 3 cards in the 5+ drop slot, you know, something like a Bashful Beastie or a Land Cycler is really good just to have something to flip up into with Manifest Dread. That way you can actually have a real way to end the game, because oftentimes these green-blue Manifest Dread decks may not end up with as many creatures as you would think. A lot of the times, the creatures they're having are just cards that say Manifest Dread on them, but aren't a creature themselves. So it's good to have like 1 or 2 big drops for that scenario. Now, I guess you could argue the Altenac could be a little bit better for 2 reasons. One, because if you get Say Its Name, if you get 3 of those, which is pretty unlikely, you do have the ability to just cheat out a big beater. And then the other big one is that it also has an inherent synergy with Terramorphic Expanse, which is a card I'm very high on, especially playing in green, because if you're able to discard it to replay a Terramorphic, go get another land, and you have cards like Say Its Name or Under the Skin to buy it back, it really just adds a lot of value being able to ramp you up to your top end. And that's really what Green Blue is trying to do. But on the other hand, Slavering Branch Snapper does make him more likely to be able to not flood, but also to be able to more reasonably splash cards from other colors, which is kind of just the argument for taking that one there. I think they're both pretty similar, but I think I would probably take the Slavering Branch Snapper here, just because fixing can be somewhat hard to come by in these very competitive pods. And although it's not the best, I do think once you have a threats around every corner, you're looking to get as much good fixing early, just so that you have a high opportunity going into pack 2, pack 3, to be able to take any bomb that you see from whatever respective color it is in and be able to fairly say that that card is going to provide a positive advantage to your deck overall versus a negative one, right? So I think I would just go with the Branch Snapper. But if you wanted to take the Altenac, I could respect it. Because we did see Terramorphic Expanses going pretty late.
Everybody wants to live the dream and draft 3 Say Its Name.
I've had a good experience with Altenac, to be honest. I also just think Branch Snappers tend to go very late. And this isn't that late in the pack.
It really is.
Okay, so some cards of note here are Turn Inside Out. There's a Keys to the House. There's also a Tunnel Surveyor. And there's a blue-black land. Interesting.
But there is still a chance that you could end up in blue-white here.
So this is very, very interesting because the Keys to the House isn't terrible. It's another one of those cards that could enable us to splash, and it makes you more interested in picking up certain rooms. One of note is the Drowned Diner Meat Locker, which is a card that I like a lot, but I definitely don't think its best home is within the green-blue space. But once you get a Keys to the House, it does make you a little more interested in that card, and blue has seemed relatively open thus far. So that is the upside with that pick. The Tunnel Surveyor is just a decent card overall because a lot of the time these green-blue decks are just trying to get to the late game as fast as possible so that they can grind out. If for some reason he ended up pivoting into blue-white as well, it's good there too. I've had some pretty good green-blue decks that cared quite a bit about enchantments, so I do think the Tunnel Surveyor is better than it looks. And then there's also the blue-black land, which I think is a very fair consideration here because realistically, black is the color I want to be splashing the most in my green-blue decks. One card of note is the Brood Spinner, which I think is one of the best uncommons in the entire format. And I really like splashing that card, although it's a 2-drop, because it has an immense impact in the late game, especially after your opponent has already used their removal. So I can understand why he would take the Keys to the House or the Tunnel Surveyor here, but personally for me, I think that the blue-black land has the highest upside, because oftentimes when I have a green-blue deck, I am happy to splash, either a premium black removal spell like Nowhere to Run or a premium rare / Brood Spinner. And I just want to have as many ways to be able to cast that card early because I do think that Brood Spinner being played as soon as possible is the best case scenario for it. And you want to just be thinking about what can I do to put the most powerful cards into my deck? And I just think that the blue black land gives you the highest potential to do that, when in reality, none of these cards are going to drastically make our deck better. I think the blue black land just has the highest possible upside, because without like super premium rooms with one side of them being high costed, I just don't think that the keys to the house is that great here.
Tunnel Surveyor certainly works well, especially with that Orphans of the Wheat that you can.
Okay, he's going to take the keys to the house. Interesting.
Again, it feels like he's picking up
The keys to the house does make me more interested in splashing red cards, I will say. I've had a lot of success with just playing like a Team or Rooms deck, oftentimes running a Smoky Lounge Misty Salon. So there's another Altenac, and as well a Slimy Aquarium. Wait, I think there was also a Meat Locker Drown Diner, right? Oh, no, that was an island. My bad. I thought that was a Meat Locker Drown Diner. The artwork kind of looks similar. But yeah, I mean, I'm not unhappy taking another underwater tunnel here, just getting deeper into blue. I think this is really the best home for that card, and with the threats around every corner, I'm way more interested in it. Okay, wait, there's a Daggermaw Megalodon. I think this is a really underrated card. That is actually my preferred land cycler to play in these green-blue decks, because I think that the Vigilance goes very, very far in this format. There are a lot of equipments that just make Vigilance better, and that's actually my preferred one to play. Okay, so we see a Shroud Stomper here, as well as a Tunnel of Hate ticket booth, and I think there's also one more important thing to note here, and that is the Friendly Teddy. So Friendly Teddy is one that I think is a lot lower upside than Tunnel of Hate Ticket Booth. But at the same time, Ticket Booth isn't a card that I'm super happy to be splashing without a good incentive. Yes, we have the keys to the house, but Friendly Teddy becomes actually pretty valuable once you know that Delirium is important to you. Because number one, you just want to have a lot of cards in this archetype to get you out of the early game and slow down your opponent. And sometimes it's difficult to get that many 2-drops because other players are not giving you any freebies here. And just milling the Friendly Teddy drastically increases your chances to turn on Delirium early because it is 2 types. It's actually way better to mill the card than it is to actually draw it. And so that is something I would consider, because I honestly haven't felt like red was that open. And Tunnel of Hate Ticket Booth, I think, is probably about 20% likely to make it into our deck currently. Ooh, he gets a Frantic Strength here. That's cool. I actually like playing Frantic Strength quite a bit in my green decks, where I don't end up with that much spot removal, because it is a card that is so bad that people don't play around it. And because they don't play around it, it's actually good. It's also an enchantment for our Delirium, but we have quite a few rooms, so it doesn't matter that much. But this is a card that I definitely think you should put into your decks more often if you are the type of player who is just never putting this card in your deck, because I do think there's a time and place for it. And I found a lot of success with the card because, like I said, people just do not respect it because in all reality, it's not that good. And then there's also a Haunted Screen in this pack, which is the 3-mana artifact that allows you to tap for any color of mana, or you can tap for white and black and not pay a life. And I think I actually would take that card in this pack over the Bedhead Beastie, because I'm not a big fan of playing a land cycler in a color that I'm splashing 1 or 2 cards in. Because if I want to just play 2 mountains, so in case we accidentally mill one of our mountains, we still have one, that doesn't make me excited to have the Bedhead Beastie, because I don't think that there's like a real chance of us actually putting this on the battlefield. It's realistically just a creature I can discard for Delirium to add a land, and I think oftentimes it really hurts you more to be doing that than actually just having a land. That's why I like the blue one a lot here, because it is looking to be our main color. I just haven't found it to be beneficial to be playing a land cycler of a color I'm splashing, except for a very small set of circumstances when I was low on playables. And I do feel like the Haunted Screen is a real win condition that I found myself playing quite a bit when I'm just kind of green base and I'm looking to put as many powerful cards from whatever colors are being passed to me into my deck as possible. Especially because we really haven't been offered that many forms of fixing thus far. We saw one Spine Seeker that was contested by the threats around every corner, so we couldn't take that. We haven't seen a Terramorphic, and I believe the only land we've seen has been a blue-black land, which is not the most likely to make it into our deck. So I'd rather just have the Haunted Screen because I think it's more likely to go into our deck. And if we have to play another color, I would be more happy that we have the Haunted Screen than not. And just creating a 7/7 with an artifact does come up and can allow you to win the game because threats around the corner does give you a lot of excess lands, and just putting more artifacts in your deck is good for hitting Delirium, right? It's these low impact picks that really make the difference a couple percentages over time, and just change your overall win rate for the format, is just taking advantage of these unobvious, somewhat low impact picks. So quick little audit of the deck before we hop into pack number 2 here. Green-blue seems the most likely color combination that we're going to move into here. I believe we have almost a equal amount of blue cards as we do green cards. And that is a little bit scary because you could be cut off in pack 2 since it is, a very competitive pod. But we ended up with 3 land cyclers, and we have a keys to the house alongside the threats. So our fixing is looking pretty good to just be able to be, base green and play whatever powerful cards are being sent our way. The one thing we are missing thus far is interaction. I do not believe that JED has any interaction at all, right? Like, he just has a bunch of creatures and, yeah, use no actual removal spells here. So I think from that standpoint, it's very likely we're going to throw in the Frantic Strength. Although it's not a premium piece of interaction, it is something I don't mind playing. It's a little bit worse when the other player has an open deck list of your deck and can see that you have it, but it does mean they have to respect it a little bit more, which could help you even more than actually drawing it. So I think he's going to have to play that, and if he doesn't get removal from these next 2 packs, his deck is going to be drastically worse. Because the one thing I hate the most is drafting a green deck with really premium bombs and having no way to interact with my opponent. Because if there's one thing I've learned from this format, it's that removal is king. It doesn't matter how many bombs you have. If you can't interact with the other player early, you're just going to lose, man. So he really has to prioritize removal going into this pack. But because of the way we have our fixing set up, he's in a really good position to just, take either, a Scorching Dragonfire or a Betrayer's Bargain, maybe even a Glassworks, play any of the red removal spells if that's what we're forced to take, and that is a good spot to be in because it means that if there are any interaction at all being passed around the table that are somewhat premium, we're more than likely going to be able to take them no matter what color they are. Okay, so we have a Drowned Diner, a Patchwork Beastie. Oh, is that a Growing Dread?
Probably a choice between one of
what is that gold card he has?
He's also looking at Meat Locker. I don't take that generally as highly just because you can also get...
Yeah, what is that gold card? Oh, no, it's a Shroud Stopper. No, it's a Winter. Okay, that's a bad rare. Wow, this pack is loaded. I think the very obvious pick here is the Patchwork Beastie. It gives us something to actually reward us for hitting Delirium. There's also a Say Its Name and a Cursed Windbreaker that this pack is so powerful, we might actually get one of those back. One of those 2 blue cards could wheel, because blue has felt relatively open at this table. And I don't think other people are going to be nearly as interested in a Cursed Windbreaker as JED, so that is a possible wheel here.
Let's see what he gets second pick here in our...
Ooh, there's a Ghost Vacuum. That's cool. Yeah, what is that alt art card? Oh, there's a Growing Dread and an Analyst. That's crazy. Wow.
Wow. Okay, so he's got Paranormal Analyst.
Yeah, that is a tough one.
To choose from.
So let's think about this. To my knowledge, he doesn't really have that much Manifest Dread. I think the only Manifest Dread that he has thus far is the 2 Underwater Tunnel Slimy Aquarium. I may be wrong about that, but to the best of my knowledge, that's what I'm thinking. And if you don't have at least 5 reasonably costed Manifest Dread effects, the Paranormal Analyst is realistically just a derpy 2-drop that can maybe allow you to slow the game down against a red-white aggro deck, whereas the Growing Dread doesn't have as high of a ceiling, but it has a higher floor, right? Like Growing Dread can only be so bad, and once you get more Manifest Dread effects, he already has good creatures to flip into, so it's likely, considering his deck is a lot of creatures thus far, that Manifest Dread is going to hit a creature more often than it would in other decks. So honestly, this is a really tough pick. I think just given how unforgiving the Pro Tour is and how we haven't really seen a lot of Manifest Dread around the table, I'd probably just go with the Growing Dread here because, it's kind of a risky decision to take the Analyst if we don't end up with getting any more of the more cheaper versions of Manifest Dread. Because, Analyst is not just only good when you have Manifest Dread, it's good when you have cheap Manifest Dread, like Growing Dread, right? If you're doing Moldering Gem Weight Room, which has a Manifest Dread at a cost of 6 mana, and you're hoping to synergize with the Analyst, that is just a far stretch. So I think Growing Dread is the safer decision here, but Paranormal Analyst is probably the higher risk, higher reward decision, right?
Be a way to move forward.
But also, if this pack comes back and it has a Ghost Vacuum, we're super excited to take that card so that other people can't use it against us in this pod. So he's going to go with the high risk, high reward decision here, the Analyst. I respect it. I mean, if you believe you're going to get more Manifest Dread, that's cool. I just don't know if I would be willing to take those risks, and that's why he is the world champion and I am not. We also just haven't seen any of the common Manifest Dread cards thus far for green. Ooh, there's a Say Its Name and a Brood Spinner. Okay, I have to point this out here. So this is a prime example of what I was talking about on that pick where Jean-Emmanuel Duprat could have picked up that blue-black land. He would be in an amazing position to take the Brood Spinner. I guess he does have the keys to the house, but he also missed out on the Haunted Screen. And just having any one of those two cards I listed, I would be super excited to take this Brood Spinner. Don't get me wrong, I would probably just still take it here and just hope that our mana base is going to make it work. But had I taken one of those two cards or both of them that I noted earlier, especially the land, I would be super excited because I would feel like it's very reasonable that the Brood Spinner could get on earlier than later, and that's something I'm super excited about. Because one thing we do have to know is that, if you take the blue-black land and you mill it and we end up with Say Its Name, we can buy it back. So, we can get those more easily accessible than something like the Haunted Screen where we're just hoping to draw it. So I think the blue-black land was a little bit better. And I don't think there was, a card in that pack that really was going to change his deck fundamentally for the better. So that is one decision that I feel like he's kind of messed up on thus far, given the way the packs are broke. But I'd probably still take the Brood Spinner here just because it is such a high payoff. And once you get a Brood Spinner, we are way more interested in picking up Say Its Names because what green's best advantage is getting bombs and having a very quick way to find them and reuse them over and over again to attrition out our opponents. And that's why Brood Spinner is so amazing in the deck.
Its name.
Yeah, as the best
without bombs, Say Its Name is a lot less interesting. It is important to note, though, had we picked up that Ultinac over the green land cycler, that's 2 Say Its Name we've seen thus far, so we would be 2/3 of the way to be able to get that Ultinac combo, and that would have been pretty cool to display in the Pro Tour. But he takes the Brood Spinner anyway, and I respect it.
Patrick BC and all that too.
Ooh, we get a Wickerfolk Thresher? Wow. Wait, Paul Chion just said it's decent? That card's insane. Are you kidding me? That is a very premium Delirium payoff, which is what our deck wants. And it's an artifact creature, which is great for Delirium, and we already have a Patchwork Beastie. Man, it's also 2 types for the Brood Spinner. I would say that saying this card is alright is an understatement, because seeing this somewhat late in Pack 2 is a signal that green might be flowing this pack. Remember, green wasn't flowing as much in Pack 1, so we might get hooked up here. Ooh, there's a Misty Salon Smoky Lounge. That's hype. And that's really the only decent card in this pack. We see a Final Vengeance and a Comeback Wrong. Wow.
Oh yeah, we are slamming Comeback Wrong.
I think a lot of people get really glazed over by Comeback Wrong. I think it's just okay. Depending on the deck, it's fine. if your opponent has like a powerful card, like even a card that has an ETB such as Unsettling Twins, which just says Manifest Dread, getting a free Manifest Dread and killing their creature does do a lot. But I have to say, this is a very unfortunate circumstance here, because realistically, we wouldn't have to take this card if our deck actually had real interaction. The main reason we have to take this here is because we have no removal thus far, and that is very, very scary for us, because I think you really would hope that Brood Spinner would be the only card that you're forced to splash in black, but I guess a removal spell is a removal spell, and I respect the pick here. I do also want to point out one more thing, and that is that Final Vengeance is actually just as reasonable of a splash as Comeback Wrong. Because like I said, people get glazed over by this card just being a rare and really just don't think about, okay, on average, it's just 3 mana kill something, which is fine. But when you're splashing a card, you would hope that it would have a little bit more of a positive effect on your deck on average since you're going out of your way to play it. And I do think there's something to be said about the Final Vengeance, given we already have 2 Slimy Aquarium Underwater Tunnel as sacrifice fodder. We also have threats around every corner, which allows us to Manifest Dread. And I think we have a couple other things that give us good fodder. So I think this is actually a very difficult decision, because I just highly value exile removal in this format. And that's what Final Vengeance gives us. And it's just a lower costed card. And I'm really big on when cards are close, just taking the lower costed one. I think on average, that is going to go a long way. But not a bad pick with the Comeback Wrong. Depending on who he goes against, this could be a better card.
Opponent plays this card. It's happened like 4 times already. It's ridiculous.
That's really rough. Fine for him.
Great pack too. Interesting. I really haven't felt like it's been that great because he has no interaction.
It would be if he takes it.
Okay, wow. So I actually want to point this out here, because had he taken the Final Vengeance as a previous pick here, the 3rd Slimy Aquarium would be a lot more enticing, because that really solidifies his fodder. But also, given that he has a Paranormal Analyst, right? Like, that's just another Manifest Dread card, and we haven't seen that many of those. But I almost feel like, although we do want another piece of interaction, it's really greedy for us to just play another black card without just saying I'm cutting one of our other colors. Given that he did miss out on that Haunted Screen and that blue-black land, man, if he had made different decisions, he would be in such a good place to really just play an almost 3-color deck here. But I feel like I would probably just go with the Underwater Tunnel Slimy Aquarium, just given the way that the draft's gone this far. I don't really want to be trying to hope for the best and, you know, play another Black Source and hope we actually get there on drawing the right lands.
Maybe the first Final Vengeance is worth a pick, but this is not a dedicated sacrifice deck.
Oh, it looks like he's taking.
Okay, he's taking it. Wow, okay. So that would be the 3rd black card that we would be splashing here, which is very interesting. I would hope that we don't have to splash, you know, black cards that are removal or 3 cards in general that are all bombs. Hopefully we get at least one piece of interaction in our colors here.
This pack looks like a bit of.
Wow, this pack looks terrible.
This is his 7th pick.
Oh my gosh, wait, that's a blue-black land. Yeah, that is an easy blue-black slam here, I believe. I believe that's a blue-black land.
And yeah.
You're just not.
Oh, it's a blue-red land. Oh my gosh, that sucks.
Or perhaps speculate on the
Yeah, okay, I'm stupid. I thought that was the blue-black one. We're taking the found footage here. Okay, wow, that is a complete miss. I want to point this out to everyone. Found footage, for anyone who hasn't played the format that much, is a very unassuming card. It is a 1-mana artifact that allows you to pay 2 mana to sacrifice it, surveil 2, and draw a card. And me and other people alike have found it very beneficial in these decks where you're being forced to go into, you know, more than 2 colors and have kind of a sus mana base, to use the found footage as a way to kind of bring all those things together and also get Delirium, because it is an artifact, and if you're surveilling 2 and putting both in the grave, that could potentially just be instant Delirium for you. And I think given that we have the Wickerfolk Thresher and the Patchwork Beastie, that is a card that I might just play even if we weren't splashing black. But given that we are, I think this is just a straight up missed opportunity to make our mana base just a little bit better. Because why would we want to dip into red when we already have the payoffs of a Brood Spinner and 2 removal spells in black, we're not going to go into a 4th color here. We just don't have the fixing for that. We have 1 threats around every corner, and we have no Spine Seeker Centipedes. This just seems like such a missed opportunity.
There are duels that he would really like here.
That's not one of them.
Yeah. This has been awesome. This is navigating a difficult spot.
Okay, there is the Junk Rare coming back to him.
It gives you that flexibility.
Okay, wow, there's a Rickety Gazebo greenhouse.
If
That's actually something we're quite
primary
interested in.
colors aren't open, well, I'll just splash another one and still find a way.
Let's be real, we're not happy about this, but that is a card we really needed to be able to bring our mana base together, especially since he missed out on those fixing sources I noted. And also, one other thing to point out about this, it is a way to have some form of recursion. When we haven't had the opportunity to take either Say Its Name or Under the Skin, it puts permanence in our grave, and that's mostly the reason you're playing this card. But just having another way to gain advantage and have somewhat of a form of recursion is something we're really interested in a deck where we haven't had the opportunity to pick up those things.
Matchup.
It's probably a little bit better in the Pro Tour where you're not going to be gifted so much. Oh my gosh, there's a Commune to Evil, and I think that's the 3rd winter we've seen.
Misanthropic guides floating around the table. Don't know if it's
Well, at least we're lowering the amount of bombs.
Not surprising.
That's hilarious. I would have taken the Commune with Evil
Ends up in JED's deck.
That's very surprising.
just to cut someone off of a good card.
Although I guess at this point, could he even possibly just be a black-green deck splashing blue?
He could be. Yeah, that's true.
Could he be a black-green deck splashing blue? I don't know if he could.
Kind of makes me think he wants.
It's difficult to say when you can't look at your cards at the time, and I think that's a really underappreciated skill, because people like me who are arena drafters, I always get access to look at the cards that I'm drafting while I'm doing it, and I take that for granted because I don't get to play in person very often, and it is a huge skill to be able to remember all of your cards that you picked and remember what your curve's looking like, as you can't look at the cards that you have already drafted until you're in between opening packs. He did get a Chandelier here, which is kind of okay, but realistically his deck isn't milling enough to justify putting that in. Although, if we do just need another big curve topper to flip into with Manifest Dread, it could be a consideration.
Right.
Yeah, considering we have the Hall Creeper and the Analyst, it makes it kind of weird to splash blue, because we have powerful cards that are low-costed. And one thing I do want to point out here is that Slimy Aquarium Underwater Tunnel is almost like a found footage in a way, because although it doesn't draw you a card, it is a Surveil too, and that is a big reason for us to be base blue, because it can dig for our lands of other colors early, and that's something that I have started to appreciate a lot in this deck. When you don't get offered the premium fixing, oftentimes I may keep a 2-lander as long as I have a Slimy Aquarium Underwater Tunnel, because I know I'm relatively likely to find another land before the 3rd turn with a turn 1 Surveil 2, even if I don't have a green land yet and I have multiple green cards in my hand. So that is something to point out, because that is a form of fixing in a way. So maybe that's why he didn't take the found footage, or maybe he just didn't understand it and hasn't played with it yet. I don't know.
Or Manifest Dread, just more 2-mana plays. Perhaps even...
I think in this deck, I might actually play the found footage over the Glimmerlight, because the Glimmerlight doesn't really do a lot for us. Playing a turn 2 Glimmerlight is like really bad.
A couple of interactive spells. So Pack 2 was great. You started out the draft with 4 uncommons and a rare. Can't really ask for too much more than that.
Pack 2 was great. Okay, Pack 2 was not great, bro. We saw literally 0 interaction spells in either of our primary colors, and we're forced to take 2 okay interaction spells of a 3rd color when we're already splashing the best card we received out of Pack 2, which is the Brood Spinner. And we didn't really get any fixing for it that affects our deck in a positive way. Yeah, these commentators are totally glazing right now. That is just not true. 10 out of 10 times, you would rather have a deck with mediocre creatures and a bunch of abundant premium interaction than the other way around. Yeah, so he has a Glimmerlight, a Silent Hall Creeper, and a Paranormal Analyst. So this deck just seems like it has a low... It seems like it has a bad curve in the low drops and a minimal amount of interaction, which is 2 things that really hurt you when you're going against other decks that are going to be faster than you.
Now, this is not just obviously green.
If you're not going to have interaction, you really need to make sure that your curve is very, very good, especially in the 2-drop slot. And he doesn't have either of those things going for him. So this is looking a little bit scary for JED. But I've said this before, and I'll say it again. In the Play Booster era, if you're able to find the open lane in your seat, you do get heavily rewarded more often than in the previous era where we had the draft boosters. So hopefully JED is able to find some interaction in green or blue, and maybe even a Spine Seeker Centipede. One Spine Seeker Centipede would make his deck vastly better. And I think there's a lot of cards that are better than it that you would be willing to pass up on just to get that fixing. Oh, it looks like he just flipped a Centipede. That's amazing. There's also an Unable to Scream. Wow. Oh my gosh, there's a Balustrade Worm.
Balustrade Worm, though.
Wow. And a Nowhere to Run.
Tough pick, right? Because
this is super interesting. Let's talk about this. This is a very difficult position. So first of all, our deck has no interaction other than 2 black spells, which are very difficult to cast with our current mana base. So the Unable to Scream is extremely valuable for that. And also, in my own personal opinion, Unable to Scream is the best form of interaction for a green-blue deck, because typically the way you want to be playing green-blue in this format is you want to be developing a threat every single turn so that you're advancing your game state and can get into the late game and out-attrition your opponent. And Unable to Scream synergizes very well with that because it's very easy to, on turn 3, play 2-drop, still get on board, and interact with their creature without losing tempo. Likewise on, the following turns. But then we also have the Balustrade Worm, which is one of the best rares in the format, especially in our deck. Although we don't have as much Manifest Dread, it is still insane. But this is just such a tough decision because there's also a Spine Seeker Centipede, which would probably impact our deck in a similar positive manner as the Balustrade Worm, in my opinion, because if you don't get one of those in this pack or like a Terramorphic Expanse, your mana base is going to be extremely sus. And in my opinion, I'd rather lose because my opponent played better or their cards were better than losing because I bricked on lands and couldn't actually play any cards. So this is a super tough one, man. I think considering his deck already has like a little bit of power in form of the Brood Spinner and the Paranormal Analyst and the Wickerfolk Thresher, I might actually just take the Spine Seeker here because we haven't seen those going around the table at all. And I just want to make sure with the scuffed mana base we have, I can actually play the game. But I think the Balustrade Worm is 100% a better card, and I could respect anyone who takes that card over, or even the Unable to Scream. Yeah, he's going to go with the Worm.
But taking the power, taking the rare.
I understand.
Go big here. It's got really
the issue is your curve is really bad, and if you can't get to turn 5,
awesome.
Yeah, it's
it doesn't matter if you have the Worm, and that's my issue with it, because I don't see how we're getting to turn 5 without dying.
Especially in a deck that has a bunch of manifests, you can just put this into the yard too if you want.
So it looks like Jean-Emmanuel Ducroix is going to go the route of taking the power, closing his eyes, and being hopeful that he has passed interaction and a form of fixing at least. Oh my gosh, there's an Oblivious Bookworm. That's crazy.
He's got that curse recording.
Well, Oblivious Bookworm is almost fixing because it does give us card selection, which, as I've noted with Slimy Aquarium, is almost mana fixing, and that is exactly one of the best cards we could have been passed. It also works really well with the Analyst, just serving as like a big brother to that card. And it's good to just be able to allow us to discard the Balustrade Worm if that implication ever comes up, or just give us Delirium by discarding something.
Right, yes.
But instead it's just a great
It's
blocker
just
in a
2,
format
3.
Yeah, Oblivious Bookworm is way too pushed. The developers made this card too strong. This card should literally be a 2/2, bro.
Great start here for Jay.
There's a red uncommon called Irreverent Gremlin that is essentially the same thing, except it's just fundamentally worse.
But there's also
Wow, Scorching Dragonfire, Monstrous Emergence.
Monstrous Emergence could be the thing because you still want.
I think right now with the cards we've seen, this is just an easy Monstrous Emergence slam. We have somewhat sizable creatures. Our deck has no interaction in our primary colors, so I think this is just an easy Monstrous Emergence. There's no other reasonable decisions. And he has fair creatures to be able to use with it. He has the Land Cyclers, remember?
Reveal from hand is a complete game changer here. If that was a normal, like even just a bite spell, I don't think he could take it because he's got all these expensive cards that he's trying to get to, and this will actually get him there.
great with the land cycling.
It is also a sorcery, which we are somewhat low on for Delirium.
Unexpected. I think he's just taking the Inspector here, most likely.
Okay, wow, this pack is really bad for us.
Nothing else, I think, that could
What if he's of the scrabbling skull crab persuasion?
You know, if you're blue-white, I could see a world
Yeah,
where
he
maybe
basically,
obviously you take the
I think,
Goblin Tamer,
has to
but
take
Right.
I'm not
the scrabbling skull crab here.
No way.
Oh, he's just
He has to take it. Okay, I don't understand how the commentators were saying that was an easy Crypt Inspector. The reality is, he needs cards at 2-drop or lower that can slow the game down to allow him to get to his late game engines, such as his Balustrade Worm and his Brood Spinner. And with what he has currently, I don't see him surviving into the late game. So he's basically forced to play this, not for the effect to mill, because I don't think that's that relevant with how many enchantments that he has, but just to have a blocker. And I think this card is very underrated as a curve filler that allows you to utilize it as a roadblock here. So that is like an okay card, but overall, not something you would be excited to be picking up here. See if we get at least one more form of interaction or fixing here.
Watchdog. Are you going to surprise me and take
Ooh, is that a blue-black land? Bro, you got to take the blue-black land.
Please
Please take the blue-black land. JED, I believe in you, brother. You need the fixing. Your mana base is sus as fuck. You passed up on the haunted screen and the blue-black land before. Do not make that decision again. Please, brother. Please.
Right? He's got land cyclers.
Yes. Okay, a land cycler is not a mana fixer. We need black. Paul Cheon. We need fucking black, brother.
So I don't blame him for taking the watchdog. That is a
Wow, he took the watchdog? Okay, interesting. I think that was just an easy blue-black land there. I'm not going to lie. His mana base is extremely botched. Okay, Glimmer Burst is fine. Although I would say it's not preferable in these decks.
Yeah, it does trigger the skull crab. You are right.
I honestly have just been very underwhelmed by Glimmer Burst in green-blue. I just don't think that's what you want to be doing. I think you want to be more proactive. And if your deck has good proactive cards like the Brood Spinner, as well as the Balustrade Worm, it's just more beneficial for you to be developing the board instead of getting card draw. But, I mean, it is card selection, which can get us to our lands with a botched mana base. Okay, ooh, there's a green-blue land. I mean, that's just an easy slam. Yeah, that's an easy slam here. We know we're splashing black, so getting a dual land in our primary 2 colors really opens up the potential for us to play 2 black basics, which is something I think he really wants to do, considering there's 3 black cards that I think we're going to be forced to play here. Ooh, he gets another Analyst? That's huge.
What?
Wow.
That's absurd.
Is that another blue-black land or no? I think it's the blue-red one.
I imagine he's just going to take the Analyst here.
There's also another underwater tunnel, though.
No, it looks like a peculiar lighthouse.
He is taking the tunnel.
Oh, wow, he's taking underwater tunnel?
Right.
Wow.
He's taking his medicine here.
with the
He
crab.
needs more manifest.
No,
I'm
no,
really
it's more
surprised he's
enchantment
taking
triggers
that.
with the skull crab.
I would assume he would want to take the Analyst.
If he mills some.
So I do want to point this out here. If JED took the blue-black land in that previous pack over the Watchdog, I think he would be heavily rewarded because he took that card to have another 2-drop so that he doesn't get demolished in his curve. And if he would have taken that blue-black land, he would have been in a really good position to just take the Paranormal Analyst as a good card to have in the 2-drops of his curve. And I think he would feel a lot better about it. But considering he didn't do that, I can understand why he would take the Aquarium. But I just feel like 3 is a lot in a deck where you're not really being paid off for that. Maybe if he had like the rare entity tracker, which draws you cards every time you play an enchantment, I understand. But realistically, his only synergies are the one Final Vengeance, and I guess the Crab, but the Crab is probably never going to win us the game. Like, if the other person is playing a green deck, maybe, but I just don't think this deck is that great overall. Okay, and he gets a Flesh Burrower. I mean, that's another 2-drop. That's even more reason for my pick of taking the blue-black land to have validity here, because we just got past 2 potential 2-drops back-to-back. And Flesh Burrow is really good as a roadblock. I think it's probably a little bit better than the Skull Crab, because you can still just chump block a huge creature in the late game. Okay, we get another Greenland Cycler. He's taking the Vengeful Possession. Okay.
I think it might actually be the best removal spell if you have a good black-red.
I guess he's just taking the Vengeful Possession so someone else can't have it, because that card is pretty good against his deck. And I guess he's just assuming he's not going to play 2 Greenland Cyclers. Ooh, he gets a Twist Reality. That's really good. Twist Reality is a card that I really like to play in my green-blue decks. He doesn't have enough Manifest to really take advantage of the Crypt Inspector. And I do just want to point out once again, had we taken the second Paranormal Analyst, this Twist Reality would be even better. But we still have one, and we have the Oblivious Bookworm, so this card is going to be awesome because we're really lacking on interaction. And this is especially one of those situations where I'm super happy to have that Frantic Strength and that Twist Reality, because even though they aren't hard removal, it's at least some form of interaction that can supplement for the low amount of interaction that we were just offered overall in this draft, which is really not what you want to be seeing.
Probably just hate drafting here or something.
He's just going to take the land here, make someone else's deck worse. I respect it. Not going to get anything else here. And I'll be interested to see what we actually do with this deck. Oh, wow. Okay, we get a Creeping Peeper. That might actually go into our deck, so we have 3 Aquarium.
Off chance that I run the Peeper, so yeah. Okay.
I think it's somewhat likely for him to run the Creeping Peeper just because of how bad our curve is. It's kind of difficult to track what amount of 2-drops he has because you can't look at your deck while you're picking the cards. But I think it has a decent chance of making to his deck, and I'm interested to see what he ends up coming up with, and also, like, what is his mana base. All right, so taking a look at our deck here, in terms of interaction, we have a Monstrous Emergence, Final Vengeance, Come Back Wrong, Twist Reality, and he is opting not to play the Frantic Strength. That is very interesting. I actually think the Frantic Strength is pretty good here, considering we're very low on interaction. And we have some decently sizable creatures. So that's something I actually would be interested in. And I'm actually surprised that he opted not to put that in. He is running the Keys to the House, though. Maybe that is one reason that he took the 3rd Aquarium, because this card can actually lock the door on a room that you have already opened, so you can reuse the Slimy Aquarium to get another Manifest Dread, and that is something that can come up when you're grinding in the late game and you just don't have any forms of recursion, so you at least have something to use your mana on. But he did get an Oblivious Bookworm, a Brood Spinner, a Silent Hall Creeper, a Paranormal Analyst, Wickerfolk Thresher, a Balustrade Worm, which are all pretty sizable, like somewhat premium creatures to be playing in this deck. And then also the threats around every corner. Oh, and he has a Patchwork Beastie. Okay, so his creatures overall are somewhat premium. And I guess he actually ended up with 6 2-drop creatures since he took that Wary Watchdog. So I guess the Creeping Peeper was not as necessary as I thought. Okay, well, I guess the Brood Spinner is not really a 2-drop because we're never playing that early. And then for his mana base, he decided to go with 7 green sources alongside the Land Cycler, 8 blue sources, and a Land Cycler, and then also 2 swamps. I think the 2 swamps is extremely correct here. I would like to point out once again, if we had that blue-black land that we missed out on 2 times, this deck would be drastically more consistent. And we also could have had that Haunted screen, which I think would have been amazing. Because one thing you have to consider is that a lot of people will have a Terramorphic Expanse or a Threats around every corner. And, you know, maybe he doesn't have another Manifest card in his hand. And you're like, I'm going to treat this as just like an additional black source. But some amount of the time, you're using your cards like Terramorphic Expanse to just add a green mana so you can curve out. So it's not always like a 1-to-1 option of another source in my deck. And that's why cards like Haunted Screen will often make the cut here. He also has quite a few 4-drops. I just consider the Slimy Aquarium a 4-drop. So he has 6 4-drops, which is a little bit high. He's also opting to play the Chandelier, which I honestly don't know if I would want to play it in this deck. I don't think that you should really put that card in your deck unless you have like 10 plus Manifest Dread effects or ways to mill. Like if you have 3 Say Its Name, okay. But very often I think the Chandelier is actually negatively affecting your deck because a lot of games you may go down to like 3 cards in deck, but if you're still winning those games, there's no reason to put the Chandelier in. A lot of people see this card as like a failsafe for milling, but yeah, games do go down to single-digit cards. It's just being able to put cards back into the deck does not most likely affect the outcome of those games. I've had it come up a little bit, but I just don't think this deck is as good at milling as it needs to be to justify putting this card in his deck. So I might run something different, but I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head what other cards he had the option to put in from the sideboard. And then he also has, that rickety gazebo to be able to fix our mana here, which is nice. So in total, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sources for black cards, which is fine. Not exactly where I'd like to be, but overall, I think what's just hurting this draft is that he didn't end up with enough interaction to sufficiently guarantee that he can get into the late game. I think he will have to get a little bit lucky to 3-0 with this draft, just because interaction is just very often going to be at the forefront of your success in this format. But overall, I do agree with his decision to move into this deck, unlike yesterday with Simon's draft. But I want to know what you guys think about this draft. I think overall, there were a couple decisions that he missed out on making his mana base better. And that's maybe my biggest complaint with his picks overall. But for the most part, I think he was just in a tough seat where he wasn't offered much interaction at all, or some of the more premium fixing cards such as Spineseeker Centipede, or like some of the recursive pieces to give himself a better late game, or even some of the lower costed Manifest Dread effects like the 2-mana green card, Manifest Dread. But I think he probably did just about as good as he could, with the pressure on him. I'm not going to give him, too much of a hard time. But let me know what you guys think about this draft and how it could have gone differently. Do you guys agree with all of JED's picks? Do you think he should have went into a completely different deck? Or are you in the same boat as me and feel like he could have just ended up with a little bit more of some premium mana fixing to really make those black cards a consistent part of his deck? Let me know down below in the comments how you guys felt about it. And if you want to see more awesome card game content like this, make sure to smash the like button, turn post notifications on, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another banger. And as always, if it's not the goo, it's got to go. Peace.
Is that indigo?